Hello everyone. I wanted to make this video to clarify how to compute the standard deviation by hand, and then how to calculate the variance if you already have your standard deviation. So let's say you don't do it by hand and you use the calculator to get your standard deviation, how you can kind of go backwards and find your variance. So I'm going to look at this guided example 3 on page 74, and I'm just going to focus on class A here. Notice for standard deviation, you have to find the mean. So in part B, it actually makes you compute the mean, which is 80.5 for class A. And so if we jump down to part D, here's where we're going to calculate the standard deviation. We have to build this table. And so if you went through this table by hand, you'll kind of figure out what's going on. I just wanted to walk you through basically all these steps, not doing all of them, but roughly how they get this table, right? So we already have our mean, which was 80.5. And in here we have all the class A's data, and in the second column we have x minus the mean. So each x is going to be each data value, like 82, 86, and 80. And x bar is the mean that we found above, which was 80.5. And so for this first entry here, we're going to use 82 minus 80.5, and that's how we get this entry of 1.5 right here, right? And then so on, you would do every single line here. So then we'd have 86 minus 80.5. Oh, I messed that up. There we go. And you get 5.5, right? So anything that's above the mean, obviously you get positive results. 80 is below the mean. So when we subtract 80.5, we get a negative 0.5, okay? So that's what's going on in this column. You just take every single value, you subtract the mean, you record those distances. Now, the idea is that we want these distances to be positive because we want to sum them. So in order to make them positive, we square them. So all these entries we have right here, we're going to square, and that's what is reported here, right? So 1.5 squared is 2.25. That's how we got this entry here. 5.5 squared, 30.25, and so on, right? Notice when you square a negative value, these become positive. So squaring all of these values in this column gives you everything in this column. Now the whole point of this really is to, if you look at the formula down here, we want to add up all the x minus x bar squareds. So this column calculates all the x minus x bar squareds, right? The distances from the mean squared. And then you add them all together to get this number right here, the 1,374.5. And that is the point of the table. Once we have that number, we can jump to the formula. So as you can see, that numerator is replaced with that sum that we got here from the table. We divide it by n minus 1. N is representing the total number of data values. So in this case, there are 18 values in your set. And so 18 minus 1 is 17. So on the calculator, I'll just show you, you do 1374.5 divided by 17, right? That would be n minus 1. This value right here is what's inside the square root. And this is what we call the variance. The variance is basically right before you take the square root to find your standard deviation, you get the variance. So if you do all these steps by hand, you get the variance first, then you take the square root of that. Notice here I'm going to do second square root, and then instead of typing this decimal again, since this was my last answer, I'm going to press second and then the minus key above it says answer, and it will take the square root of this previous answer. And there we go, we get the 8.99, which is the standard deviation. Okay, so hopefully this gives you some idea of how to calculate the standard deviation by hand. I know we didn't really go through and do it, but at least it makes sense of this table. You would have to take each value, subtract the mean, record those, square those results, record those, and then sum those to get the numerator, which goes into the formula. Okay, so the last thing is, let's say you don't want to do that and go through every little step. Let's say you want to, I don't know, go into your data and go to the one variable stats and calculate your one variable statistics, which I already entered the data here. So you can see I have the mean, I have the standard deviation. The only problem with this method is now some of the homework problems ask you for the variance, and it doesn't record the variance here. So we sort of have to take the standard deviation and we have to go backwards to before we took the square root. So we basically have to undo the square root, and you can do that by by squaring a number, right? Squaring a number undoes the square root. So you could type in this whole decimal here and then square it, but a little bit simpler than that, since you don't want to type all the numbers, is if you have your data, which I do here, if you have your data here in L1, and if you go here to vars, you can go down to option 5 where it says statistics, and then option 3 is SX. This is the standard deviation. Oops, let's get out of here real quick. Back here, statistics. and SX. So just to show you, there you go. It is the standard deviation, right? So it's just calculating the standard deviation based on the data that I inputted into the calculator. So what you would want to do is go to statistics, get that SX, and then square it, right? So you can enter your data in the calculator, then go to SX, record that, and then you can go back to vars SX and square it, and now you have your variance, right? So it's just kind of a quicker way of using the calculator to get the standard deviation and then square that to kind of go backwards and get the variance. All right, hopefully this helps out. Let me know if you have any questions, and thank you all for watching.